Right. r/IDontWorkHereLady, buckle up. You ever just try to do one good, simple thing, right? Like a basic human decency thing? And then some overzealous power-tripping security guard decides you're the problem, while your mom is literally fighting for her life in the next building over. Yeah, that was my week, and honestly, the sheer audacity still boils my blood. It started innocently enough. My mom's been battling cancer for a while now, and the hospital was practically our second home. Visiting her was the one thing that mattered, and I always tried to make her feel a little less hospital-y. That day, my mission was a decent meal, something more comforting than cafeteria mystery meat. So, I'm heading out to grab some takeout, my mind miles away, probably replaying some conversation with her doctor. That's when I spotted her, an older woman, maybe late 70s, struggling desperately in the handicap parking lot. She was clearly in pain, leaning heavily on a cane, barely inching along. Her face was pale, contorted, and she looked utterly lost. My gut just clenched. I couldn't walk past her. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need a hand getting to the ER?" I asked, coming alongside her. Her eyes, filled with a mix of pain and relief, met mine. "Oh, bless you, dear. I just need to get inside. It's not far, but it feels like miles today." "No problem at all," I assured her, gently taking her arm. She was frail, light as a feather, and it was clear every step was an agony. We started shuffling towards the hospital entrance, me trying to match her slow, deliberate pace, offering what little support I could. She leaned on me quite a bit, clearly grateful for the assistance. We were almost to the main doors when this security guard, a burly dude with a frown etched permanently on his face, stepped right into our path. He looked me up and down, completely ignoring the struggling elderly woman clinging to my arm. "Are you staff?" he barked, his voice flat and accusing. "No, I'm not. I'm just visiting my mother. This lady needed help getting to the ER, so I'm assisting her," I explained, trying to keep my tone calm. I mean, come on, we were literally helping a senior citizen in distress. Common sense, right? He didn't even blink. "You need a wheelchair for that, sir. Visitors aren't permitted to transport patients without one." I honestly just stared at him for a second. A wheelchair? She was practically at the door. We were 2 feet from the ER entrance. "A wheelchair?" I repeated, dumbfounded. "She's right here. We're almost in." "Wheelchair? Or I'll have to call for staff assistance," he insisted, crossing his arms, looking like he'd just caught me trying to smuggle contraband. The old lady squeezed my arm. "It's all right, dear. Perhaps it's best to just get one." My blood pressure definitely ticked up a notch, but what was I going to do? Argue with a hospital security guard while a little old lady was half collapsing? So, trying to swallow my irritation, I gently eased the woman onto a nearby bench. "Okay, ma'am, just hold on. I'll be right back with a chair." I gave the guard a look that I hoped conveyed exactly how ridiculous I thought he was, but he just stood there, impassive. I speed-walked to the information desk, grabbed a wheelchair, and came back to scoop her up. As I pushed her the final few yards into the ER, I couldn't help but notice the security guard talking to another one, gesturing vaguely in my direction. I heard snippets. "Shouldn't be doing that. Liability." My jaw tightened. Liability? I was literally preventing her from falling. Once she was safely checked in, profusely thanking me, I felt a flicker of warmth. At least I'd helped her. I grabbed my mom's food and headed up to her room, trying to shake off the weird encounter. Seeing Mom always made everything better. We were halfway through our lunch, chatting and laughing about some silly memory, when I looked up and saw him again. The security guard. He was standing near the nurse's station, not directly looking at me, but I caught his eye for a split second. Then he leaned in and started talking to one of the nurses, glancing over at me again. It was subtle, but I knew he was still talking about me. Complaining. About me. That was it. My fuse, already frayed from weeks of hospital visits and emotional stress, finally snapped. I excused myself from Mom, walked straight over, and looked him dead in the eye. "You know what?" I said, my voice low but shaking with barely contained fury. My mother is in that room dying of cancer. I just spent the last 20 minutes trying to help a frail old woman who was clearly in distress get into this hospital, and all you can do is stand here and gossip about me like I'm some kind of criminal?" He actually flinched, a tiny surprised jerk. He opened his mouth, probably to spout some policy BS, but I wasn't finished. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, I was trying to be a decent human being. And you know what? If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me directly instead of whispering behind my back like a coward. He just stared. His face was a blank mask, devoid of apology, remorse, or even basic understanding. After a long, awkward beat, he just turned on his heel and walked away. No apology, no explanation, nothing. I stood there, seething. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to find his supervisor and rip him a new one. But then I looked back at Mom's door, and the anger just drained out of me, replaced by a crushing weariness. What was the point? He was clearly just a miserable human being, and getting into a protracted battle with hospital security wasn't going to help Mom. It was just going to drain more of my precious energy. But I wasn't going to let him ruin my visits. I wasn't going to let his petty power trip overshadow the time I had left with my mother. So, the next day I showed up to the hospital wearing a pair of blue scrubs I'd bought online. Yep, plain generic scrubs. No hospital logo, no name tag, nothing official, just scrubs. I figured if he wants to treat me like staff, I'll look like staff. And you know what? It worked like a charm. Every single day after that, I wore those scrubs, and every single day that security guard, or any other guard for that matter, just nodded or completely ignored me. No more glares, no more whispers. The conflict just evaporated. It was the most petty, utterly brilliant solution I could have come up with. It gave me a small sense of defiance, a quiet middle finger to the absurdity of it all. More importantly, it meant I could focus on what truly mattered. Being there for my mom, without some entitled jerk making my life harder. Sometimes, r/IDontWorkHereLady, the best way to deal with an entitled person isn't to fight them head on, but to find a ridiculously simple workaround that lets you reclaim your peace. Because honestly, some battles just aren't worth the emotional toll, especially when you're fighting bigger ones in real life. Stay kind, folks, but don't be afraid to get a little clever.
All right, the last story is wild, and it's not what you think. Before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next round.
The pounding on my front door started again, each thud a hammer blow against my already frayed nerves. I didn't even need to peek through the peephole. I knew exactly who it was. The woman. She was back. And she was not going to like what I had to say. See, I'm Dawn, and I work at a women's shelter. We help women and kids get back on their feet, setting up new homes, arranging transport, even getting food parcels. It's hard, emotionally draining work, but it's incredibly rewarding when you see a family turn a corner. Most days, I love it. But today had already been a relentless churn of desperate stories and bureaucratic headaches, and I'd finally collapsed into my heated blanket nest halfway through a terrible rom-com, just wanting 5 minutes of peace. That's when she'd first shown up. She'd materialized on my porch, practically vibrating with a sense of entitlement, as if I'd personally invited her. She cut right to it, no pleasantries. I need a place to stay. Now. I blinked. My house isn't the shelter, and she knew that. I work there, yes, but this is my private residence. I explained as calmly as I could that our shelter policies are pretty clear. We can't take in adults without children, and certainly not outside of proper intake procedures at the actual facility. I even gently suggested she call the police if she was in immediate danger, as they have resources for emergency housing. But she just kept pushing. You work there, don't you? So you have to help me. What kind of place is this if you just turn people away? Her voice was rising, echoing on my quiet street. It wasn't a plea for help. It was a demand laced with accusation. It was pure, unadulterated self-absorption. I reiterated the policy, firmer this time, and told her I couldn't help her here, at my home. Finally, grudgingly, she'd stomped off. I'd thought that was the end of it. Foolish, foolish Dawn. Minutes later, the wails started. A gut-wrenching, theatrical sound that promised a spectacle. Closer and closer it got until it was right on my porch again, accompanied by the furious, rhythmic thudding on my door. Bang, bang, bang. Louder this time, more desperate, more aggressive. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I got up, walked to the door, and pressed my ear against it, listening to her ragged, angry sobs. "You have to let me in. I know you work there. You're just being cruel." Through the door, I yelled, "You need to leave my property. Now." She just escalated, her voice shrill. "No, I'm not leaving until you help me. You can't just ignore me." My patience, already stretched thinner than old elastic, snapped. I took a deep breath, counting slowly to 3, each number a steel reinforcement to my resolve. 1, 2, 3. With a surge of adrenaline, I gripped the deadbolt, spun it open with a loud thwack, and yanked the door inward. She stumbled back a step, startled by the sudden, aggressive opening. Her mouth hung open mid-shriek. We just stood there, staring at each other, me, tired and furious, clutching my dressing gown. Her red-faced and tear-streaked, looking less like a victim and more like a thwarted bully. The shock on her face was almost comical. She hadn't expected me to open the door, to confront her. She just stood there, frozen, for a heartbeat. Then her eyes darted past me, probably seeing my cozy lived-in home, which was definitely not the shelter. The silence was thick with her sudden embarrassed realization that she'd pushed too far. Without another word, she turned and bolted, her wails quickly fading into the cold evening air as she half ran, half stumbled down my driveway and out of sight. I stood there for a moment, letting the cold air clear my head, my hand still on the doorknob. Then, I slowly, deliberately closed and locked the door, throwing the deadbolt home with a satisfying click. I walked back to my blanket nest, the rom-com long forgotten. The day, with all its genuine crises at the shelter, and this absurd entitled invasion of my private space, had utterly drained me. But I'd held my boundary. And tomorrow, I'd be back at the shelter, ready to help the women and children who truly needed it, and who understood that help comes with respect, not demands.
The heavy-duty trash bag, already stuffed with plaster dust and coiled copper scraps, hit my stomach with the force of a battering ram. My breath hitched, a sharp pain blossomed, and before I could even register the shock, her hands were on my hoodie yanking. The next thing I knew, my feet were airborne, and I was tumbling down the concrete stairs, a cascade of tools, trash, and a sudden blinding agony. Just another Tuesday for a plumber's apprentice, right? Except no, this wasn't right at all. I was barely out of high school, green as spring grass, working as a plumber's apprentice in this old 4-story building that was getting a full internal gut job. My job that day? Pretty standard stuff for an apprentice. Haul tools, sweep up, and generally try not to screw anything up too badly. I was on the 3rd floor, packing up our gear for the day, dust motes dancing in the last slivers of afternoon light, when I realized I'd missed a spot. A small pile of drywall fragments and old copper fittings, just begging for a trash bag. So I grabbed one, swept it all up, and headed for the stairs. That's when I saw her. She was coming up, a woman probably in her late 40s or early 50s, impeccably dressed in a sharp blazer and tailored pants. Definitely not construction site attire. As I turned to descend, she was right there, blocking my way. I tried to apologize to step past, but she just stiffened, a look of pure disdain pinching her features. Her eyes, cool and assessing, swept over my dusty work boots, my well-worn jeans, and finally the overflowing trash bag in my hand. "Honestly?" she huffed, her voice sharp as glass shards. "Can't you people be more careful? This isn't a dump." I blinked, genuinely confused. "Sorry, ma'am, just taking out the last of the debris, almost done for the day." She leaned closer, sniffing dramatically. "And you're with maintenance?" "No, ma'am," I said, a little too quickly. "I'm a plumber, apprentice, actually. Jace." I even offered a small, awkward smile. She looked at the trash bag again, then back at me, her gaze lingering on my slightly stained hoodie. "Well, you certainly look like you should be taking out the trash. Here, let me help you with that." She reached out, surprisingly forceful, for the bag. Now, I'm just a kid, right? But I'd been taught to be careful with equipment. And definitely not to let strangers just snatch things out of my hand, especially a heavy bag full of sharp bits. Oh no, it's okay, ma'am, I said, pulling it a bit closer to me. I've got it. It's pretty heavy. Her eyes narrowed. Don't be ridiculous. I'm just trying to be helpful. Clearly you're struggling. Her tone suggested struggling was synonymous with incompetent. She lunged again, more aggressively this time, grabbing at the top of the bag. Really, it's fine, I insisted, trying to keep a hold of it. I'm a plumber. I'm just cleaning up my workspace before I leave. We're doing the... A plumber? Her face twisted into a sneer. With that outfit? Don't insult my intelligence. You're a janitor, a handyman at best, and you're being incredibly rude. She yanked harder on the bag, her grip surprisingly strong. This was getting ridiculous. Look, I am a plumber. My boss is just downstairs. You can ask him? I tried to pull the bag away, but she gripped it tighter, her face growing red with what looked like pure, unadulterated rage at being contradicted by someone she'd clearly deemed beneath her. How dare you argue with me? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the stairwell. You're a disgrace. You're going to take this trash out properly right now. And that's when she didn't just try to pull the bag away anymore. Her other hand darted out, fastening like a vise on the front of my hoodie. Before I could react, she gave a powerful, unexpected yank and then shoved the garbage bag straight into my gut with all her might. The impact was sickening, knocking the wind right out of me. My feet, tangled by her sudden lunge, and the heavy bag just gave way. I felt a sickening lurch, then the cold, hard reality of concrete steps slamming into my back, my elbows, my head, as I tumbled down. The trash bag, momentarily forgotten, bounced noisily behind me. I landed in a crumpled heap, pain radiating through every bone. For a second, all I could do was lie there, gasping for air, the metallic tang of fear and adrenaline filling my mouth. Above me, I heard a sharp cry, not hers, but someone else's. What in God's name? It was one of her coworkers, a woman I'd seen around, rushing towards us. The entitled woman, still standing at the top of the stairs, looked utterly shocked that someone had witnessed her outburst. He tripped, she stammered, her voice suddenly thin and shaky, a stark contrast to her earlier fury. He was clumsy. Clumsy? The coworker roared, already pulling out her phone. I saw you! You just assaulted him. You pushed him down the stairs. She didn't waste another second dialing 911 right there. The police showed up faster than I thought possible. I was still pretty dazed, trying to push myself up, my head throbbing, my pride smarting worse than my scraped elbows. The officer, a kind-faced woman, helped me to my feet and asked me what happened. I stumbled through my story, still feeling a bit out of it. Meanwhile, MS Entitled was putting on a performance, loudly claiming I'd been rude, I'd threatened her, I'd fallen down the stairs and it was my fault. But then, her coworker, the hero of the day, calmly stepped forward. Officer, she said, holding up her phone, I got most of it on video from the moment she grabbed his hoodie and shoved that bag. The entitled woman's face went from indignant to absolute horror. The color drained from her cheeks as the officer took the phone and watched. Her story predictably disintegrated faster than my old high school dreams. She was handcuffed, still sputtering protests, and taken away. The paramedics offered to check me out. Maybe an ambulance. But even with the ache in my head and the growing bruise on my stomach, I just wanted to go home. Nah, I'm good, I mumbled, trying to sound tougher than I felt. My boss, who'd rushed up, looked at me with a mix of concern and grudging respect. But good wasn't really the truth. That night, lying in bed, the replay loop of her sneering face and the sickening impact wouldn't quit. This wasn't just a clumsy fall. It was an unprovoked assault. So the next day, after talking to my boss and my parents, I decided to press charges. She got hit with assault and battery, served some time, and probably had a hefty fine too. It was a hell of a way to learn a lesson. But I learned it. You can't let anyone, no matter how important they think they are, walk all over you. Especially when they try to turn your trash into a weapon and your workday into a literal knockdown fight. Stick up for yourself even when you're just a kid in a dusty hoodie trying to learn a trade.
This next one's right up your alley.